Have you ever wondered why some days you wake up ready to take on the world, and other days, even brushing your teeth feels like climbing Everest? Why motivation feels strong at the beginning of a new project, then disappears the moment things get real? Why you can want something so badly, a new career, more money, better health, deeper confidence, but still not follow through? Here's the truth most people never learn. Your motivation isn't dying. It's being stolen, not by laziness, not by lack of discipline, not by weakness, but by the wrong fuel. And today, we're going to explore how motivation actually works, the real science behind why people stop caring, stop trying, and stop believing, and how you can flip that entire script in your life starting right now. And trust me, once you understand this, you will never look at your goals the same way again. Awesome. Let's begin with a simple, uncomfortable question. How many of your goals are based on what you actually want? And how many are based on what you hope someone else will think of you? It's a hard question, but this is where the door opens. Most people don't live a life guided by passion, curiosity, joy, or purpose. They live a life guided by approval. They work harder not to grow, but to look successful. They study not to learn, but to be praised. They push themselves, not to evolve, but to avoid disappointing someone. This kind of motivation feels powerful in the beginning, because fear is powerful. But over time, it collapses. And that collapse looks like burnout, like lack of interest, like procrastination, like failure. But under the surface, it's not failure. It's misalignment. This idea sits at the core of Daniel Pink's book, Drive. Pink argues that society trained us, and still trains us, to believe motivation comes from two places: rewards or punishments, carrots or sticks, prizes or consequences. We grow up thinking motivation means, if I win, I get something. If I fail, I lose something. Get the grade, get the paycheck, get the attention, get the status. But here's where it gets interesting. According to Pink, and decades of psychological research, this type of motivation only works for simple, repetitive tasks. If all you need is a checklist, if all you do is follow instructions, if nothing requires creativity or problem solving, then rewards and punishments work. But the moment life becomes open-ended, the moment your work demands imagination, or meaning or emotion, external motivation actually damages performance. Let that sink in. Most people are trying to build their future using a fuel source that only works for assembly lines, factories, and robotic repetition. No wonder motivation feels unstable. No wonder passion fades. No wonder you lose interest halfway through. Your brain isn't broken. Your motivations isn't broken. Your method is broken. Let's bring this to real life. Think back to something you loved doing as a kid. Something you did for fun, not reward. Maybe drawing, or building, or exploring, or writing. You didn't do it for attention. You didn't care if anyone approved. You didn't care if you were good. You did it because the doing felt good. Because humans are wired that way. We don't just want to succeed. We want to create, to improve, to matter. But here's the twist. As soon as someone attaches a reward or punishment to something you love, the love fades. Psychologists call this the Sawyer effect, named after Tom Sawyer convincing his friends to pay him for painting a fence, even though he didn't want to do it. When something becomes a job, it stops feeling like play. When something becomes pressure, it stops feeling like progress. When something becomes a performance, it stops feeling like purpose. And once that shift happens, motivation collapses. You start dreading what you used to enjoy. You start procrastinating what you used to rush toward. You start avoiding what used to make you come alive. Not because you're lazy, but because the wrong fuel replaced the right one. And here's where the story really begins. If rewards and punishments aren't the answer, then what is? Why do some people wake up hungry to work, to grow, to improve, even when nobody is watching, and even when there's nothing to gain? Why do some people rise from nothing, while others sit on mountains of potential and never move? The answer is simple, powerful, and rarely taught. Real motivation comes from within. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down the three forces that fuel unstoppable human drive: autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and how you can use them to rebuild your motivation from the ground up. So let's pick up right where we left off. If rewards and punishments, the things most people use to push themselves, don't create sustainable motivation, then what does? According to Daniel Pink, long-term drive comes from three powerful internal forces: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. These three things don't just motivate us, they unlock us. They flip a switch inside the brain. They turn effort into energy. They make hard work feel meaningful, not exhausting. And once someone builds their life around them, motivation becomes consistent, natural, and deeply personal. Let's break each one down. Autonomy. The power to choose. Think about the times in life when you felt most alive, most engaged, most focused. Chances are, those moments had one thing in common. You got to choose what you were doing. Humans are wired for self-direction, not control, not pressure, not micromanagement. Pink explains autonomy through four simple categories: task, time, technique, and team. Let's make it practical. Instead of being told, do this right now exactly like this with these people, your brain thrives when it can say, I'll do this project today, in my style, at my pace, in my way. This isn't laziness. This is biology. When we control our work, we feel energized. When our work controls us, we shut down. Ever notice how you can spend 8 hours forcing yourself to start something you don't want to do, but only 20 minutes finishing something you chose yourself? That's autonomy in action. It's not about doing less. It's about doing with intention. And here's the twist. When you lose autonomy, when you feel trapped in schedules, rules, expectations, or systems, your brain doesn't say, this is boring. It says this is meaningless, and motivation collapses. Pink gives a real-world example. An Australian tech company called Atlassian launched something called FedEx Days. Once every few months, employees were told, go build anything you want as long as it's not part of your job. No rules, no instructions, no limits. In 24 hours, employees created more solutions than the company had produced in months. Why? Because they were unleashed. Autonomy doesn't make people lazy. It makes them powerful. Mastery. The desire to get better. Now here's the second pillar, one that almost every school and workplace destroys without realizing it. Humans crave progress, not perfection. Progress, that feeling of, I'm improving, I'm learning, I'm growing. It's addictive, it's energizing, it creates momentum. But here's the trap. Too many people believe progress should be fast, easy, and linear, but in reality, mastery feels like this. Step forward, step back, leap forward, fall down, repeat forever. That's why Pink calls mastery an asymptote, something you can approach but never fully reach, which is beautiful and frustrating. It means there will always be more to learn, more depth, more skill, more detail. Your brain loves that. It makes life feel meaningful. But here's the danger. Most people quit right before the breakthrough. When learning becomes hard, they stop. When results slow down, they stop. When progress gets messy, they stop. Not because they don't want mastery, but because nobody ever told them that mastery hurts. Pink calls mastery a pain. It demands repetition. It demands time. It demands patience. Think about musicians, athletes, writers, creators, entrepreneurs. Nobody becomes world-class without struggle. Nobody becomes skilled without failure. Nobody becomes confident without bruises. Mastery requires grit, and grit, more than talent, is what drives long-term success. Ever wonder why some people achieve massive goals without being gifted? It's because mastery, not talent, fuels motivation. When you work hard at something you love, effort becomes enjoyable. When you avoid effort, life becomes empty. So if motivation is fading in your life, ask yourself, am I growing? Am I challenging myself? Am I practicing the same thing or improving it? Because without mastery, motivation dies. Purpose. The need to matter. Now comes the deepest truth of all. The greatest fuel in life isn't excitement, it isn't desire, it isn't ambition. It's meaning. Money can push you. Deadlines can scare you. External pressure can stress you. But purpose pulls you. Purpose attracts you. Purpose sustains you. Pink argues something powerful here. The most successful people are not the ones chasing profit, but the ones serving something bigger. Think about the moments in life when you felt proud, truly proud, not because you were rewarded, but because you contributed. You helped someone, you created something, you made a difference. That is purpose. And here's the secret. Most people are not unmotivated, they are unfulfilled. And without purpose, motivation suffocates. Identity. So now you're probably wondering, if autonomy, mastery, and purpose are so powerful, why don't more people rely on them? Why do most of us still try to motivate ourselves with pressure, guilt, fear, or rewards that barely work? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Extrinsic motivation is easier, but intrinsic motivation is stronger. External rewards are fast and convenient. Money, praise, likes, grades, titles, status. You don't have to think deeply. You don't have to reflect. You don't have to feel. You just chase. But the problem with chasing is simple. It never ends. And the moment the reward disappears, so does the motivation. That's why motivation dies. Not because people are broken, not because they lack discipline, not because they're weak. Motivation dies when life becomes a checklist instead of a calling. And Daniel Pink proves that in order to bring motivation back to life, we have to rebuild the way we think about effort and identity. Wait till you hear this. Type X versus Type ReadRewired. The two kinds of drive up. Pink introduces two types of motivation styles. Type X, extrinsic, driven by rewards, recognition, outcomes, validation, approval. Type 1, intrinsic, driven by meaning, curiosity, growth, creativity, contribution. Here's the plot twist. Most schools and workplaces are built to create Type X people. We reward students for memorizing answers, not asking questions. We train employees to follow rules, not solve problems. We encourage people to work harder, but not think deeper. And what do we create? Burnout. But Pink argues that Type 1 behavior can be learned, it can be developed, it can be trained. And once it becomes part of who you are, motivation becomes effortless. Here's how. The flow test. What you love is hidden in plain sight. Pink offers something incredibly powerful, a simple exercise that changes everything. Set a reminder on your phone to go off 10 times a day for 4 days. Every time it rings, write down 1. What you're doing. 2. How engaged you feel from 1 to 10. After 4 days, look back. You will see patterns. Moments when you were energized. Moments when you were drained. Moments when you were in flow. That invisible state where time disappears. That is where motivational gold is hiding. People don't lack motivation. They lack direction. And once you discover what naturally pulls you in, you stop trying to force yourself. You start creating alignment instead. The praise shift, fueling the flame, instead of killing it. Here's something mind-blowing. The way you praise yourself affects your motivation. Most people say things like, I'm so smart, I'm talented, I'm gifted. Sounds encouraging, right? Wrong. Pink reveals a psychological trap. When you praise identity, intelligence, talent, ability, you create fear. Fear of failing, fear of being wrong, fear of being exposed, so people stop taking risks. But when you praise effort, Work ethic, strategy, persistence, curiosity. You create resilience. You tell your brain, it's not who you are, it's what you do. And suddenly failure isn't scary anymore, it becomes fuel. This is how motivation survives difficulty. The 20% rule. A shortcut to passion. Pink encourages everyone, even if your boss won't approve it, to carve out 10% to 20% of your time for something you care about deeply. A passion project, a craft, a skill, a mission, a curiosity. It doesn't have to make money. It doesn't have to impress anyone. It doesn't even have to succeed. It just has to matter. Because here's the truth most people never hear. You don't find purpose. You build it. Motivation isn't magic. It's meaning. And meaning comes from action, not inspiration. But here's where things start to get real. Most people don't lose motivation because they're lazy. They lose motivation because they're fighting the wrong war. They're trying to push harder, work, longer, force energy, manufacture desire, instead of stepping back and asking, what am I actually working toward? And that question leads us to the next major turning point. Where does true drive come from? Not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. That's exactly what we'll unlock next. So let's go deeper. Because now we've reached the core question most people spend their whole lives avoiding. If motivation doesn't come from rewards, fear, pressure, or praise, then where does it come from? And how do you protect it when life gets heavy, stressful, uncertain, painful? When you wake up tired, discouraged, overwhelmed, or numb? Daniel Pink gives us a surprising answer. Motivation comes from meaning. It comes from purpose, from identity, from connection, from contribution. In other words, motivation is emotional, not mechanical. And this changes everything. The purpose problem. Why most people feel empty. Pink talks about something most people never say out loud. For many of us, the reason motivation dies is because we're not just bored. We're disconnected. Disconnected from why we're doing what we're doing. Disconnected from who we want to become. Disconnected from something bigger than our own routine. Think about it. You can grind for money, but if the work feels meaningless, you burn out. You can work for approval, but if the people you're trying to impress don't care, you collapse. You can chase goals, but if they don't reflect who you really are, you fall apart. It's not the effort that destroys us, it's the emptiness. Pink calls this the purpose gap. And until that gap closes, motivation will always come and go like weather. But the moment you connect what you do to what you care about, the energy becomes limitless. The two questions that change everything. Pink offers two simple questions. If you answer them honestly, your motivation will never be the same. Question number 1. What problem in the world makes you angry? Question number 2. What problem in you makes you angry? Some people are driven by the desire to fix themselves, some by the desire to fix the world, most by a mix of both. And here's the twist. You don't need a perfect answer. You don't need a grand mission. You don't need a dramatic calling. All you need is a direction, a why that feels real. Once you have that, discipline becomes easier. Progress becomes enjoyable. Motivation becomes natural. Purpose is the battery. Autonomy is the ignition. Mastery is the fuel. And when those three align, game over. The motivation paradox. How work becomes play. Pink introduces something fascinating. When people become deeply engaged in something meaningful, it stops feeling like work. It becomes play. That doesn't mean it's easy. It means the struggle feels worth it. Think about athletes training at 5 a.m. Think about musicians practicing scales for hours. Think about writers typing and deleting and typing again. To outsiders, it looks exhausting, but to them it feels right. That's real motivation. Motivation isn't the spark. It's the fire you build. And that fire grows only when you're willing to do the work that matters to you, not the work that impresses someone else. The big shift, from if-then to now because. Pink says most people live in the if-then pattern. If I do this, then I'll get that. It sounds logical, but it kills motivation. The real pattern looks like this. I'm doing this now because it matters. No reward, no punishment, no scoreboard. Just purpose. And when that happens, motivation switches from temporary to permanent, from pressure to passion, from exhaustion to energy, from struggle to strength. But here's where things get interesting. If purpose is so powerful, why do so many smart, talented, ambitious people still feel lost, tired, unmotivated, confused, or stuck? Why is it so easy to drift away from what matters? Why do we know what we should do, but we don't do it? Pink answers that too. And the truth might surprise you.